The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers for the third time that evening, clattering against the concrete floor of my garage like a judge's gavel sealing my fate. I was elbow deep in the guts of a busted air conditioning unit, trying to coax life back into the compressor when the voices drifted down through the heating vent above my workbench. "You think Dad's clueless?" My daughter Sophie's voice carried that particular brand of contempt reserved for 21-year-olds discussing their pathetic parents. "He's just too oblivious to see you're screwing Tyler. He's at the gym all day, not like he'd notice anyway." The wrench might as well have been a sledgehammer hitting my chest. I froze, oil-stained hands suspended in midair, every muscle in my body suddenly rigid as rebar. "Sophie, that's enough." My wife Rachel's voice was sharp, but not with denial, with irritation at being caught. "I'm Dan Cavanaugh, 44 years old, owner of Cavanaugh HVAC Services, and apparently the last person in my own house to know my marriage was circling the drain. 22 years I'd been fixing other people's broken systems, while mine fell apart right under my nose." The conversation above continued, muffled but clear enough to shatter whatever illusions I'd been clinging to about my perfect suburban life. "Mom, everyone knows. Mrs. Peterson saw you at the Marriott last Thursday. Janet's mom saw you getting into Tyler's car outside the courthouse. You're not exactly being subtle. Your father and I... things are complicated." Complicated. That's what we were calling it now. I set the wrench down carefully, my hands surprisingly steady for a man whose world had just imploded. The garage suddenly felt smaller, the walls pressing in like the inside of a coffin. But instead of panic, something else was building in my chest, something cold and calculating. See, here's what people don't understand about guys like me. We're not the shouting type. We don't throw dishes or storm out dramatically. We fix things, we solve problems. And when something's broken beyond repair, we tear it down and start over. The voices moved away from the vent, leaving me alone with the hum of the fluorescent light and the distant sound of the evening news from upstairs. I wiped my hands on an old rag and really looked around my garage for the first time in years. This was my domain. 20 years of accumulated tools, spare parts, and the organized chaos of a man who understood how systems worked, how they could be manipulated, how they could be turned against themselves. My phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. "Working late again. Don't wait up." I almost laughed. Working late. Right. Instead, I typed back, "No problem. Love you." Because that's what good husbands do, isn't it? They trust. They believe. They make it easy. I pulled up Tyler Keene's Facebook page on my phone. Tyler Ty Keene, luxury car salesman at Premier Motors downtown. 36 years old, divorced. The kind of guy who wore cologne to the grocery store and called everyone buddy while looking over their shoulder for someone more important. His latest post was a photo of himself leaning against a silver BMW, caption reading, "Another satisfied customer. Living the dream." The comments were full of middle-aged women dropping heart-eye emojis like breadcrumbs, including one from my wife. I scrolled through his photos. There, 3 weeks ago. A group shot at some restaurant downtown. Rachel was in the background, barely visible, but I'd recognize that laugh anywhere. The timestamp showed 8:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, the same Tuesday she'd claimed to be at a client dinner. My phone rang. Mookie O'Hara's name flashed on the screen. "Danny boy, you coming down to Sullivan's tonight? Got a new batch of that bourbon you like." Mookie owned Sullivan's Tavern, the kind of place where the regulars knew each other's drink orders and the bartender doubled as a therapist. We'd been friends since high school, back when we both thought we were going to be professional boxers instead of small business owners with bad knees and worse luck. "Yeah," I said, surprising myself. "I'll be there in 20. Everything all right? You sound weird." "Just tired. Long day." "Aren't they all, brother? Aren't they all?" I hung up and looked at the air conditioning unit sprawled across my workbench like a patient on an operating table. Tomorrow, I'd fix it. Tonight, I needed to think. The drive to Sullivan's took me through the heart of our little slice of the American dream. Millfield was the kind of town that looked good on paper: low crime, decent schools, tree-lined streets where neighbors still waved at each other, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business, which meant secrets had a shelf life of about 15 minutes. Unless you were careful. Unless you were smart about it. Sullivan sat on the corner of Main and 3rd, a relic from when this part of town was still working-class honest, instead of trying to pretend it was something fancier. The neon sign flickered between Sullivan's and Sullivan's, giving the place a perpetual identity crisis. Mookie was behind the bar, his massive frame making the space look smaller than it was. He'd been a heavyweight in his day, before a detached retina ended his boxing career and sent him into the hospitality business. Now he channeled his aggression into perfectly crafted old fashions and a zero-tolerance policy for troublemakers. "There he is," Mookie called out as I walked in. "The man who keeps our air conditioners running and our marriages cool." If only he knew. The bar was half empty, which was normal for a Wednesday night. A couple of regulars hunched over their drinks at the far end, and a young couple shared a booth in the corner, too wrapped up in each other to notice anything else. I slid onto my usual stool, and Mookie had a beer in front of me before I could ask. "So, what's eating you?" he said, wiping down glasses with the efficiency of a man who'd been doing it for 15 years. "What makes you think something's eating me?" "Because you've got that look. Same look you had before you fought Jimmy Torino back in '98, like you're calculating angles." Mookie always was too perceptive for his own good. "Rachel's having an affair," I said, the words coming out easier than I expected. Mookie's hands stilled on the glass he was cleaning. "You sure?" "Caught her on the phone last week, whispering. Found hotel receipts in her purse. Tonight I heard Sophie talking about it like it was common knowledge." "With who?" "Tyler Keene. You know him?" Mookie's expression darkened. "Pretty boy from the car lot?" "Yeah, I know him. He comes in here sometimes, always trying to impress whatever woman he's with by ordering expensive whiskey and talking loud enough for everyone to hear his stories." "What kind of stories?" "The usual garbage. How much money he makes, how his clients love him, how his ex-wife was crazy. The kind of stuff insecure guys say when they're trying too hard." I took a long pull of my beer, letting the cold liquid buy me time to think. "What would you do?" Mookie set down the glass and leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You want the honest answer? I'd make them both regret it in ways they never saw coming, but that's just me. I'm not talking about anything violent." "Neither am I. Violence is for amateurs, Danny. Smart guys use their heads. They find leverage. They wait for the right moment. They make sure when they strike, it counts." The beer was starting to taste bitter. Or maybe that was just my mood. 22 years, Mookie. 22 years I've been fixing everyone else's problems, coming home every night, trying to be a good husband and father. And this is what I get. "You get a choice," Mookie said. "You can be the victim, or you can be something else entirely." "Like what?" His smile was sharp as a blade. "Like the guy who writes the ending." I finished my beer and left a 10 on the bar. The drive home took me past Premier Motors, where Tyler's silver BMW sat under the bright lights of the lot like a trophy. I slowed down, memorizing details: license plate, parking spot, security camera angles, just in case. The house was dark when I got home, except for the porch light Rachel always left on. Her car was in the driveway, which meant she'd made it home from her late meeting. I sat in my truck for a moment, looking at the house we'd bought when Sophie was 5 and we still believed in forever. It looked the same from the outside. Same white siding, same black shutters, same flower beds. Rachel tended with the obsessive care of someone who needed everything to look perfect. But now I could see the cracks in the foundation, the places where the paint was starting to peel. Inside, I could hear the television murmuring from the living room. I found Rachel on the couch, laptop open, papers spread around her like she was preparing for battle. "How was your meeting?" I asked. She didn't look up. "Long, boring. The Henderson contract is more complicated than we thought." "Anything I can help with?" Now she looked up, and for just a second, I saw something flicker across her face. Guilt? Annoyance? It was gone too quickly to tell. "No, it's just legal stuff. You wouldn't find it interesting." I nodded and headed for the kitchen, playing the part of the understanding husband. But as I passed behind the couch, I caught a glimpse of her laptop screen. Facebook was open, and Tyler Keene's profile picture smiled back at me like he was already won. In the kitchen, I made myself a sandwich I didn't want and thought about what Mookie had said, about being the guy who writes the ending. Rachel's purse sat on the counter where she'd dropped it. I'd never been the type to snoop, but then again, I'd never been the type to have reasons to snoop. I glanced toward the living room. She was still focused on her work, and quietly unzipped the main compartment. Receipts, breath mints, her usual collection of pens that didn't work. But tucked into the side pocket was something that made my pulse quicken. A second phone. A cheap, prepaid model, the kind people bought when they wanted privacy. I turned it on. No passcode. The text messages told the whole story. Weeks of back and forth with T, arrangements for meetings, intimate messages that made my stomach turn, plans for a weekend getaway next month while I was supposedly visiting my brother in Chicago. But it was the most recent message that made me smile for the first time all day. "Can't wait for tomorrow night. Danny's working late at the Peterson job. We'll have the house to ourselves." Tomorrow was Thursday. The Peterson job was scheduled for Friday. I turned off the phone and slipped it back into her purse, my mind already working through possibilities. Rachel thought she was so careful, so clever. But she'd made a mistake. She'd given me exactly what I needed, advance notice. I finished my sandwich and headed upstairs, calling out a casual good night to my wife. She mumbled something back, not bothering to look up from her performance. In our bedroom, I set my alarm for 6 a.m. and lay down fully clothed. Sleep wasn't going to happen, but I needed to think. I needed to plan. Because Mookie was right. I had a choice to make. And I was starting to like the idea of writing my own ending. Thursday morning came with the kind of gray drizzle that made everything look like a crime scene waiting to happen. I was already showered and dressed when Rachel stumbled into the kitchen, hair still messy from sleep, wearing the old Northwestern University t-shirt she'd had since law school. "You're up early," she said, not quite making it sound like a question. "Peterson job got moved up," I lied smoothly, pouring coffee into my travel mug. "Emergency situation. Their main unit went down completely." She nodded, already distracted by her phone. Probably checking messages from Tyler. The thought should have made me angry, but instead I felt something else, a cold, calculating satisfaction. She was making this too easy. "I'll probably be there until at least 10 tonight," I continued. "Maybe later. You know how these emergency calls go." She wasn't even pretending to pay attention now. I kissed the top of her head, inhaling the scent of her shampoo one last time. 22 years of marriage, and it was going to end with me standing in our kitchen, lying about a job that didn't exist while she planned to bring her lover into our home. "Love you," I said. "Love you too," she replied automatically, her thumbs already flying across her phone's keyboard. The drive to my shop took me through downtown, past the courthouse where Rachel worked, past Premier Motors where Tyler was probably getting ready for another day of selling overpriced cars to people who couldn't afford them. The whole town looked different now, like I was seeing it through new eyes. Everyone going through their routines, playing their parts, pretending their lives weren't built on lies and compromises. Cavanaugh HVAC occupied a converted garage on the industrial side of town, wedged between a plumbing supply company and a place that fixed lawnmowers. It wasn't much to look at from the outside, but it was mine. built from nothing over 15 years of 18-hour days and weekend work, one satisfied customer at a time. My assistant Jimmy was already there, loading parts into the van for a routine maintenance call. "Morning, boss. You look like hell." "Thanks for the pep talk," I said, unlocking the office. "Listen, I need you to handle the Morrison job today. Tell them I had a family emergency." Jimmy's eyebrows went up. "Everything okay?" "Will be soon." I spent the morning making calls, rescheduling appointments, clearing my afternoon. To anyone who asked, I was dealing with a personal situation, which was technically true. At 11:30, I drove to Sullivan's. Mookie was prepping for the lunch crowd, cutting vegetables with the precision of a surgeon. "You look like a man with a plan," he said without looking up. "I need a favor." "Name it." "I need you to come to my house tonight, around 8. Now he looked up, his knife pausing mid-chop. "This about what we talked about yesterday?" "Rachel thinks I'm working late. She's invited Tyler over. I want witnesses when I catch them." Mookie's grin was sharp enough to cut glass. "You want me to play the shocked friend who just happened to stop by?" "Something like that." "Danny, you sure about this? Sure about once you pull this trigger? There's no going back." I thought about Rachel's second phone, about Sophie's casual cruelty, about 22 years of trying to be the good guy while everyone else played by different rules. "I'm sure." "Then I'm in. But we do this smart, right? No violence, no property damage, nothing that gets us arrested. Just witnesses and evidence." "Good man. What time should I show up?" 8:15. Give them time to get comfortable." The rest of the day crawled by like a wounded animal. I went home around 3, telling Rachel I was grabbing some specialized tools for the Peterson job. She barely looked up from her laptop, but I noticed she'd showered and changed into a dress I'd never seen before. "Don't wait up," I said, playing my part. "This is going to be a long one." "I'll probably just order takeout and watch Netflix," she replied. "Maybe invite Jenna over for company." Jenna Price was Rachel's law partner and best friend, a sharp-tongued woman who'd never liked me much. The feeling was mutual. "Sounds good. I'll call you later." I drove to the McDonald's on the other side of town and sat in the parking lot, eating a burger I couldn't taste while watching the clock on my dashboard. At 6:30, I drove back to my neighborhood, but parked 3 blocks away, on a side street where my truck wouldn't be noticed. The walk back to my house took 5 minutes. I slipped through the back gate and positioned myself behind the garden shed, where I had a clear view of the front door and driveway. The evening was warm enough that most of the windows in the neighborhood were open, and I could hear the domestic symphony of suburban life. Televisions, dinner conversations, dogs barking. At 7:45, Tyler's silver BMW pulled into my driveway. He sat in the car for a moment, checking his reflection in the rearview mirror, running his hands through his hair. Even from 50 yards away, I could see his nervousness. This wasn't routine for him yet. He was still excited by the danger, the thrill of screwing another man's wife in that man's own house. Rachel opened the front door before he could knock. She'd changed again, into a black dress that hugged her in all the right places. They kissed on my front porch like teenagers, her hands tangling in his hair, while he pressed her against the doorframe. I pulled out my phone and started recording. They disappeared inside, and I settled in to wait. At 8:10, I texted Mookie, 5 minutes. At 8:15 exactly, his pickup truck turned onto my street. He parked behind Tyler's BMW and walked to the front door with the casual confidence of a man who belonged there. Which, technically, he did. Mookie had been to my house dozens of times over the years, for barbecues and poker games and Sunday football. He knocked. I crept closer, moving to the side of the house where I could see through the living room window. Rachel appeared at the door, her hair mussed, lipstick smeared. She looked panicked. "Mookie, what are you doing here?" "Looking for Danny. His phone's going straight to voicemail, and I need to talk to him about something. His truck's not here, but I saw the lights on. He's working late. Emergency call." "Mind if I wait? It's kind of important. I could see her calculating, trying to figure out how to get rid of him without raising suspicion. Tyler appeared behind her, shirt untucked, looking like a deer caught in headlights. "Oh," Mookie said, his voice carrying perfectly in the still evening air. "I didn't realize you had company." We were just discussing a legal matter." "At 8:15 at night? In your living room? With your dress half off?" That's when I made my entrance. I walked around the corner of the house, phone still recording, and climbed the front steps like I owned the place, which, legally speaking, I did. "Evening, everyone," I said, my voice steady as a rock. "Don't mind me. Just forgot my tools." The silence that followed was beautiful. Rachel's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Tyler took a step backward, his face cycling through confusion, fear, and something that might have been relief that he wouldn't have to keep pretending anymore. Mookie, bless him, played his part perfectly. "Danny, there you are. I've been trying to reach you. Your wife said you were working late, but—" He gestured at Tyler, letting the implication hang in the air. "Yeah," I said, pulling out my keys. "Funny thing about that Peterson job. Turned out to be a false alarm. Took me all of 10 minutes to fix." I looked directly at Rachel. "Good thing I came home early, right? Almost missed your legal consultation." "Dan, this isn't what it looks like," Rachel started, but I held up a hand. "Please, don't insult my intelligence. I've got eyes and I've got video." I held up my phone. "Plus whatever Mookie here witnessed." Tyler found his voice. "Look, man, I can explain." "No need," I said, stepping into my own house. "I think the situation's pretty clear. You're screwing my wife. In my house. While I'm supposedly at work." The living room looked like a tornado had hit it. Couch cushions askew, Rachel's shoes kicked off by the coffee table, Tyler's jacket draped over my favorite chair. They hadn't even had the decency to go upstairs. "How long?" I asked Rachel. She was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks in black rivers. "Dan, please, let me explain." "How long?" 3 months, Tyler said, when Rachel couldn't answer. At least he had the spine to be honest. 3 months. I nodded, processing this information. "So this started right around the time you got that promotion at the firm. The one you said was going to change everything for us." "It's not about you," Rachel said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's about me. About what I need." "And what you need is him." I gestured at Tyler, who was now looking around the room like he was planning escape routes. "He makes me feel alive again." The laugh that escaped me surprised everyone, including myself. Alive. Right. "And I make you feel what, exactly? Bored, trapped, completely empty inside?" "Dan, don't—" "Because let me tell you something about feeling alive, Rachel. I felt alive when we bought this house. I felt alive when Sophie was born. I felt alive every morning for 22 years when I woke up next to you and thought I was the luckiest man in the world." Mookie cleared his throat. "Maybe I should go—" "No," I said firmly. "Stay. I want witnesses for this conversation. I want everyone to hear exactly what my wife has to say about our marriage." Tyler was edging toward the door, but I blocked his path. "Where are you going, champ? This is your party too. You wanted to play house with my wife, now you get to deal with the consequences. Look, I never meant for it to happen." "Sure you did. You meant every bit of it. The sneaking around, the lies, the hotel rooms. You meant all of it." I pulled out my phone again. "Just like you meant this." I played back one of the videos I'd recorded earlier. Tyler and Rachel kissing on my front porch, her hands all over him while he pressed her against the door I'd painted just last summer. Rachel's face went white. "You were watching us?" "I was protecting my interests, making sure I had evidence when it came time for divorce proceedings." The word divorce hit her like a physical blow. She sank onto the couch, her perfect facade finally cracking completely. "Dan, please, we can work this out. We can go to counseling, we can—" Work it out? I looked around the room, at the evidence of their betrayal scattered across my furniture. Rachel, you brought another man into our home. Into our bed, for all I know. You looked me in the eye this morning and lied to me. You've been lying to me for 3 months. I never meant to hurt you. But you did it anyway. That's the part you don't seem to understand. Intent doesn't matter when the damage is done. Tyler finally found his courage. She's not happy with you, man. Hasn't been for years. Maybe it's time you face that. I turned to him slowly, and something in my expression made him take a step back. You know what, Tyler? You're absolutely right. She's not happy with me. I work too much. I don't make enough money. I'm not exciting enough for her anymore. But here's what you don't understand. That was between her and me. You don't get to be the solution to our problems. You don't get to be the hero who saves her from her boring life. Dan, Rachel started. I'm not finished. My voice was getting harder now. All the anger I'd been holding back starting to leak through. You want to know what really gets me? It's not even the affair. It's the disrespect. The assumption that I'm too stupid to figure it out. The way you've been laughing at me behind my back for months. We never laughed at you, Tyler protested. No? Then what do you call it when you're screwing my wife while I'm out working to pay for the house you're screwing her in? Mookie spoke up from his position by the door. Danny, maybe we should call it a night. You've made your point. Have I? Because I don't think they understand yet. I don't think they realize what they've done. I walked to the mantelpiece and picked up our wedding photo. Rachel in white, me in a rented tux, both of us young and stupid and convinced we'd beaten the odds. You know what this represents? I held up the photo. 22 years of my life. 22 years of getting up every morning and choosing to love you, even when it was hard, even when work was stressful and money was tight, and we were both too tired to remember why we fell in love in the first place. I set the photo down carefully, face down. But you quit choosing. You decided it was easier to find someone new than to fix what we had. And that's fine. That's your choice to make. But don't you dare stand there and tell me it just happened, or that you never meant to hurt me, or that it's about what you need. Rachel was sobbing now, her perfect composure completely shattered. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know you are. You're sorry you got caught. Tyler stepped forward and I could see him trying to salvage something from the wreckage. Look, we can all be adults about this. No one has to get hurt. Someone already did get hurt, I said quietly. The question now is what happens next. I looked at my wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, crying on the couch where she'd been planning to betray me. I looked at Tyler, still trying to figure out how to spin this situation to his advantage. I looked at Mookie, my oldest friend, standing by to witness the end of my marriage. And for the first time in months, I felt something like peace. Here's what's going to happen, I said. Tyler, you're going to leave. Now. And you're not going to come back. Not to this house, not to this neighborhood, not anywhere near my family. You can't tell me. I can, and I am. Because if I see you again, if I even hear that you've been sniffing around my wife or my daughter, I will make your life very complicated. And trust me, you don't want that. He looked at Rachel, maybe hoping she'd fight for him, but she was too busy falling apart to offer any support. Rachel, I continued, you have until Sunday to decide what you want to do. If you want to try to save this marriage, we can talk. But it means no more contact with him, no more lies, and a lot of very difficult conversations about how we got here. And if I don't, then you can move out, and we'll let the lawyers handle the rest. She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. What about Sophie? What about her? She's 21 years old. She can make her own decisions about who she wants to have a relationship with. The room fell silent except for the sound of Rachel crying and the distant hum of the air conditioning unit I'd fixed that morning. Normal life, continuing on despite the chaos. Tyler grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. This isn't over, he said, trying to salvage some dignity. Yes, I said firmly. It is. After he left, Mookie and I stood in my living room while Rachel cried on the couch. The house felt different now, like something fundamental had shifted in its foundation. You okay? Mookie asked quietly. I will be. You need anything? Just some time to think. He nodded and headed for the door. Call me if you need me, day or night. After he left, it was just Rachel and me, sitting in the ruins of our marriage. She'd stopped crying, but hadn't moved from the couch. Dan, she said finally, I really am sorry. I know. Do you think, is there any chance we can fix this? I looked at her, really looked at her, for what felt like the first time in years. She was still beautiful, still the woman I'd fallen in love with in college. But something essential had changed, something that couldn't be fixed with apologies and promises. I don't know, I said honestly, but I know it's not going to be easy, and it's not going to be quick. She nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. I should probably stay somewhere else tonight. Probably. She gathered her things and headed upstairs to pack a bag. I stayed in the living room, straightening the cushions, picking up the pieces of our life that had been scattered across the floor. When she came back down with an overnight bag, she paused at the door. For what it's worth, she said, you handled this better than I deserved. Maybe. Or maybe I just finally learned how to fight back. After she left, I sat alone in my house, listening to the silence. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and difficult conversations and the messy business of untangling 22 years of shared life. But tonight, for the first time in months, I felt like myself again. The man who wrote his own ending. Friday morning arrived with the kind of crisp clarity that made everything look sharp-edged and unforgiving. I woke up alone in my own bed for the first time in 22 years, and the silence felt both liberating and terrifying. Rachel hadn't come home the night before. No call, no text, nothing. Part of me wondered if she was with Tyler, but a bigger part of me realized I didn't care anymore. That realization should have been devastating, but instead, it felt like taking off shoes that had been too tight for years. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, looking out at the backyard where Rachel's flower garden was already showing signs of neglect. The roses she'd babied all summer were drooping, their petals scattered across the mulch like confetti after a party nobody wanted to attend. My phone buzzed, a text from Sophie. Mom told me what happened. We need to talk. I stared at the message for a long moment, trying to decode the tone. Was she angry? Disappointed? Taking sides? With Sophie, it was always hard to tell. She'd inherited her mother's talent for keeping her real feelings hidden behind a carefully constructed facade. I typed back, Sure, when? I'm driving up from school today. Be there around noon. Great. Nothing like a heart-to-heart with your daughter about why your marriage imploded to really start the weekend, right? The morning crawled by with agonizing slowness. I tried to keep busy, returning phone calls, scheduling appointments, pretending my personal life wasn't a smoking crater. But every few minutes, my mind would drift back to the scene in my living room, to the look on Rachel's face when she realized I'd been recording everything. At 11:30, I drove to Sullivan's. I needed to see a friendly face, and Mookie's bar was the closest thing to neutral territory I could think of. You look better, Mookie said, as I slid onto my usual stool. More like yourself. Feel better too. Weird, right? My marriage just exploded and I feel better. Not weird at all. Sometimes the anticipation is worse than the actual event. He set a beer in front of me without being asked. What's the plan now?